This is my pleasure to welcome Gary Bennett today out of Mexico. And Gary has a wealth of experience in insurance for sure, sitting on boards today and advising lots of companies in many capacities, and also not being only located in Mexico, being around the world, a world
Mm,
citizen. So, welcome, Gary. My pleasure to have you here to our podcast, Master AI Disruption. I can't wait
mhm.
to hear. Maybe you want to say, I mean, I know you have a lot to
Ah,
say, but a few words on what got you here to those boards that you sit on
mm.
today and the companies that you advise.
Thanks, Francis. And interesting reflecting back on that question and celebrating my 43rd year in the life insurance business on the 21st of May just passed. It's been interesting. As you mentioned, being a global citizen, I live in a number of places and I built, I guess the commodity or the asset that we build over a lifetime is a network. And fortunately, what I did was I've worked in a dozen different countries for three major international insurance companies. And I figured as I was getting close to what I call my third innings, or what Americans might call their fifth quarter or their 10th innings if they're baseball, was I started to figure out what I wanted to do next, that I was both healthy enough, knowledgeable enough in certain things, not trying to over engineer stuff, to be able to add some value to organizations. So I set about building a portfolio business, which I set up in Hong Kong, goodness, 11 or 12 years ago when I stepped down from being a CEO. I remember walking out of a board meeting in New York and saying, good, I'm glad I've got something to do other than just paint the fence, take the trash out, walk the dog, and wanting to really have an active life, both personally and professionally. So I went about building this portfolio business, which was called North Star Consulting, which is what I've sort of used as my practice for some time, and then went about reaching out to a network of people that I'd either helped developed from an individual point of view. And I say this, Francis, I'm very fortunate. I think I've tallied up that there are 17 chief executives around the world that have worked with me at some stage. I won't say for me, they worked with me at some stage and they've gone on to be successful CEOs and entrepreneurs and organizational chief executives in their own right. So I had a network of people and I let people know that I was available. I say this, I've used LinkedIn for goodness since almost its inception as a way of both reaching people, building a network, working with people. And because I had such a breadth of network, and I used this terrible Australian term, and if you'll forgive me, I never pissed anybody off too much over the last 43 years, that they wouldn't at least have a conversation with me. So I set aside some money, I set aside some time, and I set aside a network and said, let's build a portfolio of businesses that are, if I said technology-led financial services businesses.
Mm.
I really believe that we're at a significant inflection point for some time, moving from this traditional old-fashioned insurance, let's call it insurance for the want of a better word,
Mhm.
insurance business. I spent some time with organizations where, the man knocked on the door and sold you a life insurance policy. And I think that was how I first encountered the industry myself decades ago. And I felt that there was a better way to do things. I felt that there was a more innovative, creative, technology led way to do that. So I tried to surround myself with organizations and people who had a like minded view of where the world was going and build both financial investments in those businesses and
Mhm.
where it was possible, either be involved as an advisor or as a board member, as
Mhm.
well as an investor in those businesses to try and encourage us
Mhm.
to think more like black sheep rather than completely turning the market upside down, to at least be in the pack, but to be different enough to be recognized in how we did that. And again, that's allowed me to do business in a number of different countries with businesses that all are on the edge of this change in the way the world should see and should access the things that have been sold in an old fashioned way for a couple of hundred years. So
Mhm.
long answer, Francis, but that was the journey. I continue to be on that both personally and professionally. And there are a couple of things that I needed to do personally, and I say this very, very openly. When I stepped out of that boardroom back in 2017, in May 2017, I was 166 kilos. I had type 2 diabetes. My cholesterol was through the roof, and I was probably minutes from death's door. And I made a major decision also to pivot my life to be using all of the access to innovation, creativity, modern medicine, and exercise and health to change myself. And I've lost about 72 kilos, I think, in that period. And I set aside things that I hadn't done during my executive career. On that day, I put a 2 hour appointment with the most important person in my life, which was me, from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. I've extended that a little bit because I do a few more things, but I started to walk the very next day and haven't stopped walking ever since. I walk between 9 and 10 kilometers every morning. I swim a kilometer most days when I can. I do some weights and some stretching because I figured that if I was going to add value in this third innings, as I call it, in this new world with young, innovative, dynamic people, technology businesses, I needed to be able to do a couple of things. One, I needed to be able to work as long as I wanted, but also needed to be able to look after my family for as long as I needed to as well and not
Yes.
die. And I needed to be healthy to do that. Like I use some of these things that I do as corny examples. For instance, I have two board meetings tonight, one at 9 o'clock and one at 10:30. Now, they'll be short and crisp. They're with India, so the time zone is different, but they're great. And by doing the things that I started to do 9 years ago, all of these things, both from a business point of view and a personal point of view, have helped change my life, create longevity, move into those cycles, move into those areas, get involved with that sort of business, work with dynamic, young, enthusiastic, innovative change agents to hopefully disrupt. It's an interesting word, but to help to be the black sheep of an industry that needs a black sheep from time to time.
Wonderful. Okay, what a journey. Wow.
Mhm.
Yes. And then today, in this new situation that you find yourself now for 9 years,
Yeah.
what is the most exciting part to you?
Look, I think that every day you find something that's different and new. And we live our life in cliches, which we probably shouldn't. But, I remember a university professor that I was working with for a long time in one of the businesses said to me, Gary, you use these cliches all the time. He said, and they're really good. Goodness, you learn something new every day. And I think that the ability that we have now, and I've again reflecting on this the other day, with the information that is available to us in every aspect, whether that be through email, whether that be through research, whether that be through YouTube. And Francis, one of the things that I insisted that I do with those, like I walk for 90 minutes and I swim for a bit over 30 minutes and I listen to something that educates me every day in that sense. So every morning before 8 o'clock, I've listened to something new, different, exciting, or challenging in the world. And I do it, and I've managed to get headphones for the pool as well as for the walk. And I think just working with people and again, helping to moderate and advise people in business and where they go next and how they do things. You see things from a completely different perspective, which, and I've said this, I've been a CEO since I was 32 years of age. You can become overly confident and arrogant in your own ability and in your own opinion. And I think that what you learn, I have children as well who are all doing different things in different businesses and so forth. Everybody has something new and exciting to offer. And I think that that's what excites me about every day. Yeah, I love my walk. I'm one of those people that loves watching the sun come up every morning and I can hear the birds and see the same people in the street, say hello, all that sort of stuff. But I think the exciting thing is that we're living in a world that's incredible. Like if you think about, and all sorts of things. Again, I was reflecting on this conversation this morning as I walked. I think in January 1997, I got my first emails. I was based in Hong Kong running a business that I was turning around again, like many, and I got 4 emails on that day. Okay. Now, I've just bought some new devices this week and I was up with the guy at the sort of halfway Apple store. We don't have a real Apple store here in San Miguel de Allende, unfortunately. I have 11 email IDs. I get between 300 and 400 emails every day. A lot of it's crap and junk, but a lot of it's information and education. And if you think about like everything from being able to, as we were discussing, before the call started, watch the football from Boston this afternoon on a television in Mexico on a screen as big as they get.
Yes, yeah.
We've lived through and continue to live through incredibly exciting and dynamic changes. Has it always been perfect? No, it hasn't. And it's never going to be perfect. But I think that what we're seeing dynamic opportunities really turn into life changing and world changing situations. Yeah, we're living in really challenging times and we won't touch on that, but we're also living in really incredibly innovative times. There are just And maybe I overdosed on the Kool-Aid, but I gave up owning a motor car 13 or 14 years ago when we lived in Manhattan. I was given a choice. Do you want cash or do you want a car? Give me the cash. I'll take the Uber. I'll take the black car. I'll do all those things. Now, every now and again, I'll get an Uber back from the supermarket because when I finish my walk, I write to my wife and say, do we need anything? And she'll say yes. And if I've got a big bag full of groceries, I'll get an Uber. Now, I'm in Mexico and I'm getting into a BYD or a Chinese electric vehicle. Like, it's just, I don't know, maybe I drank the Kool-Aid, as I say, but I just think it's exciting what happens and the sort of things that in my own industry are starting. And it's been challenging because it's an industry of conservatism, of risk
Yeah, yeah.
aversity, of slowness that really needs
Tell
its
us,
bum kick sometimes, Francis, to be
tell
genuine. But
us,
yeah,
tell us what you see as trends. It's all fascinating. Then tell us what you see as trends in the insurance
yeah.
industry.
Look,
Yeah.
look. I think it's interesting, and I sort of cover a number of markets, but there are 3 or 4 main markets that I think are really interesting. What we're finally starting to see, and it's taken a long time, is people starting to understand and accept the opportunity that whether you want to call it artificial intelligence, whether you want to call it innovation in distribution, in customer access, in just simply fulfilling the promise in a contract and accessing information, going from 52-page applications and weeks to get approval to things that could be done in minutes. We're finally starting to see some of those things now. Things like instant underwriting, where you can take a photograph of yourself or a video of yourself and you can say age, BMI, smoker, non-smoker, a whole range of upfront indicators that say, sell this guy a policy or don't sell him a policy within minutes. And then with the technology that wraps around that, as far as acquisition of goods, and goodness, we've all fallen in love with Amazon and a whole range of other payment and acquisition. We can buy things instantly. So we're starting finally to see that. But this has been my fear for decades. Like, I watched the innovation of technology because I'm old enough to remember when computers started. We went from manual to computers, then we went through the late 90s where we had the tech boom bust, and we've seen the banking situation, all those things over the years. But there was always this risk aversity in insurance, not to try things, not to do things, because we were worried we were going to lose people. Now, my view is that what we've done is we've facilitated a better life for everybody. Sometimes people don't see that, but access to so many things in a much more simplified manner. Yep, I might not be able to be a physical medical underwriter anymore with an insurance company because the technology will now take all of the data, all of the information on an individual and say, there it is, without waiting weeks for someone to drag out a file or for a doctor to approve his manager to do things or for an agent to follow up. So that sort of incredible innovation is slowly starting to happen. I think that my view is that there's got to be more that goes with that, because I still think that we look at in the industry and in lots of industries in these short-term cycles. And I think that rewarding people in a longer-term fashion in businesses that haven't really thought about the business that they're in, which is really long-term. I remember a fantastic chief executive said to me years ago, he said, Gary, remember the things that you do today impact someone's life in 30 and 40 years. Now, yes, that's correct. But I also think that, again, deviating, there is a greater level of diversification with financial services and life insurance products than ever before, that we're finally starting to see it. Not just when I drop dead, my family will get a check. There's a whole range of opportunities to access funds, to borrow against, to fund against, to benefit at different times during the journey of life, that are finally coming up. And this understanding of both how that impacts an individual as they grow through life. And again, one of the businesses that I do actually sees this value of an individual rather than just saying, it's Gary Bennett, when he drops dead, we'll give him $3 million. That over his lifetime, that he's probably likely to make tens of millions of dollars, invest in different things, own properties, invest in businesses, educate children. So that journey of being able to help that in that journey, rather than just say we'll pay out a benefit when he dies, is really, I think, where the industry is starting. Early days, and I've always been stupidly ahead of the curve with a lot of the things that I've done, or ahead of the wave. Those things are finally starting to happen, but people are realizing that it's going to come at some change to what they do now.
That
I
was my
won't say.
question. So how do you advise your clients and or
Hmm.
companies that you sit on the board to prepare for this?
Francis, I think that, and again, there are some things that come with age and some things that don't. We've seen, people like me have seen change in so many areas over the lifetime, and we will see more over the lifetime of our children and so forth. I think that what will happen is people Change is never easy. Always people hate change. Always difficult. Like you spend your life in organisations being innovative and creating change and building new strategies and so forth. I think the lesson is that we're all going to benefit out of this over time if we're smart enough to recognise how it adds value to us and how we add value to it.
Mhm.
And I've used this term often, and again, I'll sort of float into some of these points probably over time. I've taken over at different times in my career from a lot of people who got to a point where they thought they could sit, go to the club for lunch, play golf twice a week, take a holiday every 4 weeks, and not do anything different and just keep the ship sailing the way it always
Mm.
was. Now, my view is that what we're looking for are people who are smart enough and innovative enough to accept that change is constant. Change is permanent. We
Yeah,
live on a dynamic planet and a dynamic world. And if you look at the things that have been created in the last 20 years, much of it didn't exist.
sure.
Um,
But
you
would you
know,
agree that it's intensifying?
Look, is it intensifying? Why wouldn't it? Of course, we have much more access to the things that allow that to intensify. Does that frighten people? Goodness, I can tell you, my mother was terrified with email and a telephone. And this generation will be like, if I said my generation, and I live in a town that's full of semi or retired Americans and Canadian snowbirds, goodness, that some of the things that they won't try is crazy. But I think that there's a new generation that will try it
Mhm.
and will be dragged along with it, like we've always been dragged along with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, and as I say, sometimes I think that I'm out of step with my generation a bit, but I think that that's what we've needed to be. We needed to be more innovative, more creative, more thoughtful about what I was going to do. And well, yeah, it will upset the apple cart, but the apples will still be there and we'll still find a way to digest them.
So we see a lot of research showing from BCG, from
Mm.
HBR, from Harvard Business School, yes, or
Yeah.
McKinsey. And McKinsey, like the new edition of their book, Rewired, said that for
Mm.
every dollar you spend on tech, multiple dollars should follow when it comes to change, people
Mm.
and
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a ratio 60, 70% of those AI initiatives fail, no
Mm.
definite
Mm.
ROI, no
Yeah.
definite impact, etc. So, what do you see successful companies do concretely to address this kind of high failure
Yeah.
rate and
Mhm.
see success with AI transformation?
Look, Francis, I've talked a lot at different times over the years about the value of human capital and
Mhm.
how you recruit people and the sort of people that you recruit. And I've said this often, you don't recruit in your own likeness, otherwise you end up with just another one of you, and we want something different. Now, I think that what that requires is a challenging view of the way we look at people. As you said, for every buck that we spend on innovation and technology, we've got to spend 4 or 5 times more on that. So it's finding the right sort of people with the right sort of attitude. Skills are an interesting term. I think more these days it's adaptability and flexibility and understanding to be able to take on board the
Mhm.
things that are happening. Now, does that mean that you're 50 or does that mean that you're 25? I don't know. I think it's an attitudinal thing and finding the way to recruit for that. And I say this, a couple of the businesses that I'm involved with, one, we're expanding the board. So to try and find the right sort of people to bring onto that is really important.
Sure.
And friends, I use terrible terms all the time. I don't want a gin and tonic board. Like you don't want someone who's saying, "Is it over yet? Can I have a gin and tonic yet?" You want people who add value, who have experience, who are dynamic, who are innovative, and on that basis, bring them in. And also, we've been going through the process with another one of the businesses where we're recruiting a new chief executive, where the businesses get to a point where, and I think there's an inflection point with businesses, and I think that this is what I've tried to do over my career, is find a time when you need to bring someone new in to do those new innovative, creative things in that space. So I think that there's an understanding of the human capital, what that human capital looks like, and then how you recruit for that, not in the old fashioned traditional way, but in a much more innovative way. Now, does that mean, and this is doing the same sort of research that you do, does that mean that the typical MBA that we've all fallen in love with over the last 30 years is the right way to go? Is it something else? Is it time for universities and employers to find new and different ways to recruit, to
Mhm.
train, to educate people? Yeah, I think it is. What does that look like? Goodness, I wish I had the answer. We all wish we had a magic wand or a crystal ball, but we are looking for people who are creative and can communicate that creativity across the change of an organization, not just, and this is what frustrates me at times about this transition that I think we're going through. Some sensational technology people, product development people on the planet, but they have to also be able to inform, articulate, and educate those people around them, from customers to shareholders to employees and workmates, to understand that so that we can get to where we want to get to
Mhm.
more rapidly. Because I do think that it's important, and like none of us want to get left behind. I think that we have to be mindful of, of the things that we do in life are
Sure.
going to create change. But at the same token, goodness, I'm a history buff. Like I can't wait to see what's going to come next because I think it's only going to be better than what it was yesterday.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for
Mm,
this. And
mm,
then maybe one last question. Of all the boards that you sit on, what have you
mm.
seen that has really surprised you as a defining innovation?
Look, I think I'm really fortunate. There's a couple of each of the boards I sit on are different in their own way. One is some of the interesting medical innovation that's taking place here in Mexico with one of the boards, where we're identifying what should or shouldn't happen from a medical point of view. Because I say this,
Mm.
it's been an interesting business with hospitals and the medical profession, sometimes overdiagnosing, which is really, really quite fascinating. And one of the things that we did over the last year was identified where there was a significant need for an additional opinion on some of
Mhm.
on some of the medical diagnosis. One of the businesses in the UK, which is a new style life insurance business, which really has an innovative approach to the way people get to a point in time with their old term insurance policies where they're no longer required and where that can be transacted and
Mm.
cash taken rather than just throw it away. So I think that's it. And this is predominantly in the life and financial services business and a US business that really covers everything from cover to upfront lending to an ultimate death benefit in the end. All of these things
Yeah.
are done now independently by insurance companies, but this business packages them all up in a really innovative way. And it also looks at using influencers as distributors rather than the traditional life insurance agent. And there is this new world of influencers that if we're smart enough to work out how to use them, the opportunity to grow an industry where it has more than one solution, which is a death benefit. It's got,
Mhm.
you can borrow money for a house or you can, budget or you have a benefit where something happens to you along the way. So there's 3 or 4 different components of this and you do it through a differentiated, more innovative distribution channel like influencers, then I think they're the sort of exciting things that we're starting to see happen in this business.
Including in health insurance, you see influencers.
Yeah, no, completely. Because look, it's interesting, and I shouldn't use my own experience, but I do. Like a month ago, I was diagnosed with a hip issue, and an orthopedic surgeon was going to put me in hospital and replace my hip. And I went out and I did significant research. I did this thing through this process of additional opinion and further research.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, I was being, and this is a terrible thing to say, I was being overserviced. And I guess at 20 grand for a new hip, and if you can do one of those every day of the week, you've got a great practice. So I think that what we're seeing is at least the ability for consumers to ask the hard question, is this right for me? And I think that that's everything that we do. I think that what the modern world of technology has enabled us to do, and some people don't like it from
Mhm.
a business point of view, it gets me the opportunity to research, review, and if I need a second opinion, to get
Mhm.
one,
Mhm.
or if I need to use that research, and people say you shouldn't be Google Gary, you shouldn't be Dr. AI, all those sorts of things. But at least it enables us to think more about it. And I know that what it did for me, instead of having a full hip replacement, spending up to 16 weeks where I couldn't fly or walk or run or swim, I went for an additional style of medical procedure, which early days, but so far it's
Mhm.
worked.
Mhm.
And my own general practitioner here said, Gary, I'm not commercial. What we want you to do is we want you to live a long and healthy life. Keep doing what you were doing, Gary. So that was an
Oh,
interesting learning in health insurance. And I think like some markets like the US will be extremely difficult to crack. Other markets will be easier because there will be more government involvement or more public health.
yeah.
Countries like Canada and Australia and Mexico in particular, where there at least is a public health sector that will give you an option. So yeah, I think we're going to see this in lots of different areas, Francis, where AI and technology
Sure.
enables us to be better informed. Maybe it's dangerous, but I think that, all progress comes with some challenge, some change, and some risk, but that's what we're in life for.
Absolutely. Used to the people, that's what the brand says.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you so very much, Gary. You
Mm,
shared so much to us and with us. I
mm,
can't thank you enough. I hope we'll stay in touch. I'm sure we
please.
can
Yeah. Mm,
certainly exchange notes
mm,
on some
mm,
clients and
mm.
maybe produce content or,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that could be interesting. Yes. Or
Yeah.
anyway, Yeah.
And Francis, happy to be more specific at some stage in the future. It's always difficult in first conversations. How narrow, how broad am I? As I say, life's been terrific for me. I do live by the mantra that the best is yet to come, and
Good.
I believe that. And I don't think that any of us have been disappointed because I think that we just keep getting better and better. Yep,
Yeah.
there's a few roadblocks along the way and a few
Always. Always.
challenges, but life's good. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Wonderful. My pleasure, Gary. We'll stay in touch.